This is Dr.RED Panda.
What if I told you, in 19th century England, a woman could be publicly humiliated, physically tortured, simply for speaking too much? This device is called the Scold's Bridle. It didn't just silence women, it made their voice a crime. I'm Dr. Red Panda, and today we're opening the iron jaws of history itself. Who deserves silence? In Victorian England, a woman's voice was not a right, but often a dangerous threat to the social order. At that time, society saw women as the property of their husbands, expected to be obedient, modest, and silent. Their primary roles were to manage the home, care for children, and maintain decorum. These strict roles were enforced through a powerful mix of laws and religious teachings. For example, laws dating back to the 17th century, like the Poor Law of 1601, emphasized a woman's duty to behave with quietness and modesty, condemning those who were scolding or nagging. And under the Treason Act of 1533, it was considered a serious offense for a wife to disobey or rebel against her husband's authority. Religion, however, was the strongest voice of all. Theologians like Jean Calvin declared that women must remain silent in church, quoting the Bible's first epistle to the Corinthians. Women should remain silent in the churches. They are not allowed to speak. This message was drilled into society as a moral imperative. To speak out of turn was to be labeled immoral or rebellious. Women who dared to raise their voices risked harsh consequences, not only social condemnation but brutal punishments. Among the most infamous was the Scold's Bridle, an iron muzzle designed to punish and silence nagging wives. This device, with spikes pressing painfully against the tongue, ensured silence through agony. As one historian wrote, the Scold's Bridle did not merely lock a woman's mouth. It locked away her freedom and dignity. This grim reality was the result of a tightly woven system of laws, customs, and religious doctrines that kept women bound in silence. The Scold's Bridle was not an accident of cruelty. It was a symbol of the institutionalized oppression that defined Victorian England's gender hierarchy. The husband's weapon. They called it justice, but in truth it was a weapon, a tool of control wielded behind closed doors. In Victorian England, the Scold's Bridle was not just a public punishment, it was a terrifying instrument of domestic power. While society demanded women's silence in public, it was often their own husbands who enforced this cruel rule at home. Imagine a man frustrated with his wife's words, whether she dared to complain, to question, or simply to express herself. With no legal recourse, some husbands took matters into their own hands. They kept a bridle at home, ready to silence the woman they claimed to love. Locked onto her head, the iron spikes pressed mercilessly against her tongue, rendering speech impossible and swallowing the pain behind her screams. One recorded case tells of a woman named Mary from a small English village. She was accused by her husband of constant nagging and disobedience. He strapped the bridle onto her for hours, refusing to release her until the neighbors intervened. Mary's silence was enforced through pain and fear, not law. No court was needed, one historian writes, because the law sided with the husband, the head of the household. The local magistrates often turned a blind eye to these punishments, justifying them as a way to restore peace and order in the family. Church leaders echoed this sentiment, preaching that a wife's role was to obey and submit, and that discipline, even brutal discipline, was necessary for a virtuous home. But the bridle was more than physical pain. It was a tool of psychological terror. Husbands could silence their wives at will, isolating them emotionally, destroying their confidence, and breaking their spirit, all in the name of correction. This silent oppression was widespread. In some towns, men boasted about owning a bridle, displaying it as a symbol of power and control. One Victorian gentleman even wrote in his diary about using the bridle on his wife after she spoke out during a dinner party, an act that shocked their social circle but caused no legal trouble. Speak when spoken to became not just a command but a chilling threat. In this shadowy world of iron and silence, women lived in constant fear, not just of physical pain, but of losing their voice, their identity, and their place in society. The stories of women behind the iron mask. Behind every cold piece of iron, there was a real woman, with fears, hopes, and a story waiting to be told. Take Eleanor, a widow from a quiet Scottish hamlet in the late 1600s. She wasn't a noblewoman or a witch, just a midwife who spoke too boldly at the wrong time. When she warned the townspeople that a wealthy merchant's practices were endangering children's health, her outspokenness was seen as rebellion. The punishment? Eleanor was forced to wear the Scold's Bridle for 2 days in the village square. The iron bit pierced her tongue. She couldn't swallow, couldn't cry out. Villagers who once thanked her now averted their gaze, or worse, threw insults. But Eleanor stood straight, eyes burning not with shame, but with defiance. Her ordeal was etched in a parish record, barely a paragraph long, yet it held centuries of silenced rage. Then there was Elizabeth, whose crime was simply arguing with her husband in public. In 1765, she was bridled and chained outside their parish church on a Sunday morning. The congregation stared in horror and fascination as Elizabeth suffered in silence, her dignity stripped away. Her story spread quickly, a chilling warning to other women who might think to challenge male authority. Stories like these are far from rare. Across centuries and continents, countless women endured the same silence, the same chains. Yet each found her own quiet defiance. Their voices may have been stifled, but their courage echoed through time, shaping a legacy that refuses to be forgotten. Shame as spectacle. What if punishment wasn't just private pain, but a public show? In Victorian towns and villages, the humiliation of women accused of scolding or nagging became a grim form of public entertainment. The Scold's Bridle wasn't just a tool for silencing. It was a device used to parade shame in the town square. Imagine a woman, her head locked tightly in iron, drool escaping her mouth, unable to speak or eat, chained to a post as neighbors gathered to gawk. These were not isolated incidents. In many communities, public shaming was a regular spectacle. Women were led through the streets, sometimes on horseback, sometimes barefoot, their iron masks gleaming in the sunlight, their faces a picture of pain and disgrace. Spectators, men, women, and children alike, gathered to jeer, mock, and sometimes throw rotten vegetables or mud. Market days became grim reminders. Speak out of turn, and this will be you. One court record from 1792 describes a woman punished for calling a local official a thief. She was bridled and locked in the stocks for 2 days. Crowds laughed and the children played games around her. Another story tells of a woman who dared to argue with her husband in church, an unforgivable offense that landed her in the bridle, chained outside the very building meant to preach forgiveness. The crime didn't matter, a historian notes. The real offense was a woman's voice itself. The spectacle wasn't just about punishment. It was about control through fear and public degradation. Local officials used these displays to send clear messages. Silence the women, maintain order, protect the natural hierarchy. But the effects went beyond the woman herself. Families lived under a cloud of shame. Neighbors whispered. Marriages broke. The bridle became a symbol, not only of physical restraint, but of the social chains that bound women tightly in place. To be bridled was to lose not just your voice, but your dignity, your community, your humanity. Silent resistance, the power behind the mask. Even in the darkest chains, the human spirit finds ways to fight back. Though the iron bridle silenced women's voices, it could never fully cage their minds or hearts. Victorian women, trapped in oppressive homes and societies, discovered secret ways to resist. They didn't march in the streets or shout slogans. Those options were often impossible or deadly. Instead, resistance was quiet, subtle, and deeply courageous. Some women kept hidden diaries and letters, pouring out their frustrations, hopes, and dreams onto paper, letters that were often never sent, but preserved their inner lives. Others formed whisper networks, gathering in secret to share stories, support each other, and exchange forbidden knowledge about their rights and the law. Many disguised themselves, dressing as men to escape the watchful eyes of husbands and neighbors, seeking moments of freedom in anonymity. In the far-flung British colonies, women sometimes created new communities where the strict social hierarchies of England were less rigid, and women could carve out spaces to express themselves. "They silenced our voices," one woman wrote, "but never our minds." These acts of quiet rebellion weren't recorded in official histories. They were the invisible threads holding together a tapestry of defiance. It was through these secret resistances that the seeds of the women's rights movement were planted. The fight for education, the right to vote, and legal equality all grew from the courage of women who refused to be silenced. Even today, echoes of their silent resistance remind us, oppression can cage the body, but the mind and spirit will always seek freedom. Throughout history, countless voices have been silenced by iron, by laws, by fear. But silence is never the end of a story. It is a call to listen more carefully. What hidden voices in today's world are still waiting to be heard? What invisible chains do you see binding people around you? Share your thoughts and stories below. Let's break the silence together. And that's a wrap for this episode of the video. I'm Dr. Panda. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Until next time, take care.